So last year, I made a giant bead-encrusted flouncy ball gown in 7 days for a fantasy ballroom photo shoot. That event, the Wanderlust Ball, we're doing it again this year, but I want to take things in a different direction. For starters, I am absolutely not smashing out another costume in a week. In 2025, we stand actually planning things in advance and not con crunching, theoretically. Secondly, instead of going for a powerful femme fatale fairy vampire lady, I want to make a silly little court jester. I made a jester costume for Halloween like a decade ago, and I think the concept has been in the back of my brain ever since. More recently, the popularity of like clowncore and jesters has brought that back into the front of my brain, and now I can't get the damn concept out of my head until I make something with it. Hello, I'm Miss Twisted. You guys can call me Charlotte. I do cosplay and crafting and other weird and whimsical stuff, and I'm gonna make a pretty little fairy clown / jester girl. And even if I'm going for a more whimsical look, this is by no means going to be less opulent or less detailed than last year. In fact, my plan is to go absolutely crazy with adornments and embellishments and accessorizing and other words that basically just mean decoration. This is going to be far bigger than that ball gown ever was. So I've got a game plan ready to rumble for this one, so let me talk you through how it's all going to come together using one of my favorite tools for cosplay or any creative project, and the sponsor of today's video, Milanote. Milanote is an organization tool for creative projects, and I've been using them for every major project ever since I discovered them, just because it's so versatile and intuitive. This board here started out as one of their templates. My go-to is the project plan, but let's head into the mood board I have nested here, and you can get a feel for the aesthetics and feelings I'm going for. I've been collecting my inspiration from all over the place using Milanote's web clipper tool, so no copy pasting or screenshotting needed. I've organized into different sections, so at a glance, I got big old puffy sleeves, puffy pants, and some kind of cool doublet with a little pointy waist. On the left are my references for colors and patterns, and through the middle is my overall shapes and concepts. You can add your own notes or go full freeform and doodle right over your board. Back out to my overall project plan. I'm a to-do list kind of gal, so that's always my first step. And having learned my lesson last year, I'm planning my time ahead, using Milanote's grid function as a weekly diary so I can map out my schedule. Milanote lets you pull in links, so I've got a few YouTube videos I want to keep pinned so I can reference them later on. One last shopping list and even a maps link to one of my favorite trim shops, and I think we are all planned out and ready to get started. The fact that Milanote is completely free, no time limit, keeps me coming back for every project. So I hope you guys will check it out, and if you've already got Milanote, let me know what you're working on in the comments below. Try Milanote for yourself and sign up for free using the link in the description below. For now, I'm really excited to do a bit of show and tell and show you guys the big box of goodies that I've been accumulating for this project. Oh, I feel like a kid in preschool because this is always my favorite part of the video, where I get to show you all the cool stuff I've got. These gorgeous taffetas and dupionis, the camera does not do justice to the color on these. I want to eat them, they are so tasty. Some organza, hopefully to make a bit of a clown collar with. And for the sake of not boring you guys with every single individual fabric, I have a ton more of different teal fabrics, in case you have not yet picked up the color theme of this project. Outside of those silks, the majority of the fabric in that box of goodies is all stuff that I either already had in my crafting stash or stuff I found secondhand at op shops. For embellishments, I might have gotten a little carried away, but look, anything I don't use in this project, I tend to use a lot of gold, so I'll probably use it all up eventually. This one is my absolute favorite. It is literally a trim consisting of a bunch of tiny jingle bells. I know that sound is going to drive me absolutely bonkers by the end, but it's so perfect. And I found the same trim that uses this more teardrop style instead, so I guess that's a backup in case I just cannot handle the jingle bells. Speaking of bells, giant jingly bells. I think I've got around 5 of these I harvested off my son cosplay from a few years ago. There are so many other bits and pieces for this project, but I'm getting impatient. I really just want to start and make a funky little jester hat, so let's get going. So starting from the top with my jester hat, also known as a cap and bells if I've got my information correct. I have a feeling that clowns or jesters are probably a bunch of your special interests, so feel free to info dump or correct me in the comments below. Anyway, I have this giant piece of upholstery fabric. Friend of a friend had an upholstery factory that closed down a couple of years ago, so I have this stuff in no short supply. My plan here is to essentially carve carve out a sort of curvy tail shape to make those little points that go on the hat. I don't know if this is gonna work, but my thought in my head is essentially 2 of those tails that sit like at the front around here, and then 2 long ones that go down the back. Essentially like the Leku or head tails that a bunch of those Star Wars peeps have. And hey, if Star Wars is your special interest instead, feel free to correct me or info dump it in the comments below as well. I genuinely love that stuff. All right, welcome to my floor. For some reason, all my videos end up starting here. I'm just gonna freehand what I think the shape is going to be. I think I want like fairly tight around the head, but like sitting above where my neck is, because I really want a big clown collar. So I don't want it to like get caught on that. So word of advice here, I learned from experience, don't use your good fabric scissors on this foam. They won't be good fabric scissors anymore. Let's put it that way. So one of the reasons why I want to make 4 is because I really like how the jesters look when you can see the little tail things right at the front. But I also really like how they look like sleek and going down the back of the head. So I kind of thought like, why not both? Okay, so my thought is like this little shape here. I can't tell whether that's too big or not, but I think that I can go with it and just start to like trim it down to a smaller size. Okay, that still feels too big, but my gut instinct says to go with it because I'm gonna gradually trim down this shape anyway, and I can always like chop a little bit of that off and, oh, actually that's about exactly the shape I want. Yeah, no, that's that angle right there. That's actually exactly the size and shape that I was thinking, like having 2 of those either side like that. And this stuff is really thick, so I think rather than cutting out another one of those, I think I can just chop this straight down here. So yeah, that's a pretty good start. All right, so looking a little square right now. So I'm just gonna start shaving off the corners just bit by bit until it starts to be all nice and rounded. Okay, I think we almost got it. The clown collar is gonna sit around here, so I just wanna make sure it's not gonna like hit that. So might be okay. Ooh. All right, 2 lovely rounded horns now, and they seem to be sitting pretty well. So yeah, looks good. I got the posture of a cashew here on the floor, and my spine is taken about as much as it can. So now that these are done, I can head back up to the desk. Step 2, I've got this polyester batting or wadding. Still haven't quite figured out the difference. Anyway, my plan is to wrap these in a bit of this, because this will hopefully just help like smooth out some of these like rougher edges, so that once I'm getting fabric over it, you won't see the lumpy bits. Now I think from memory, last time I used this stuff, I just hot glued it down because it sticks really well to the upholstery foam. Now I know these now look far worse than I did 5 minutes ago, but trust the process with me here, guys. For now, I've got 2 much bigger ones to make. And you can already see here, I went for a drastically different size for these back ones. I think I really just liked that long curled fabric that you get on some of the jester images where they're dancing or singing or spinning around. Okay, so this is where I'm at right now. Firstly, good morning, time skip. I finished off the front horns yesterday. This is my back horn. I'm just gonna start calling them horns because I don't know how else to describe them. But this one's gonna sit like here going down. It's holding its shape a little too well right now. And I want it to be a little bit more floppy, but I have a plan for that. I've seen a lot of different like fursuit makers when they're making tails essentially have something like this, but with a bunch of notches in it that allows it to just have a little bit more movement through it. So I'm gonna try that. Now's probably as good a time as any to let you guys know that I changed directions quite a few times in making this hat. So just a heads up, we're taking the scenic route, a bit of an adventure. If you're looking for a straight up tutorial, well, this ain't it, chief. All right. So this is turning out pretty well so far. You can see I've taken some fairly decent chunks out of the foam and it's giving a lot of movement. It's a nice little floppy horn now. I can't keep calling it a horn. It sounds weird when you're describing a floppy horn. I'm gonna go back to calling these tails. Anyway, with 2 of these done, they're gonna sit here and here and should give me some good movement. Much like before, we are adding that extra layer of padding on the outside. And because I want to keep a little bit of a curve on the end here, I've got some armature wire. I'm just going to start pushing into the foam on the end before wrapping that in some more of that padding. And I'm cutting those ridges back into this area too, just because I don't want the padding to start restricting that movement. I don't know yet if like splitting the tails is actually going to help keep it nice and floppy, but just in case it does, I've done them with the front ones too. Now I need to attach these all to a base and essentially do all the patterning and stuff, which is why I'm wearing this beanie that's like 15 years old from my emo phase, because I'm gonna put that on this to help like bulk it out, and we're gonna make a duct tape pattern. And if you're wondering why the beanie, it's essentially to help bulk out the mannequin head to make it closer to the size of my actual head. I'm not just using this beanie to show off my 2011 emo drip, but also because this pink line is kind of a really good indication of where I want my hat to sit, and I can use these to kind of like map out where I want some of the tails to sit too. I think that's roughly where I want it. Oh, it does look like the Star Wars guys, doesn't it? All right, hopefully that's not gonna be a problem by the time I'm finished. The thing is, I just need this to stay in place temporarily so that I can like wrap the whole thing in cling wrap. I think I just realized why this looks so much like the Star Wars people. It's because they often have those little helmet type things and then the leku like pointing out the back of them. So that might not be an issue once this whole thing is covered in fabric and they're not like a separate part of it. All right, we are breaking out the fragile tape early for this one because these pins are just not taking. So maybe if I just literally tape this to my beanie temporarily, it'll stay in place for the pattern. Oh, that was my fabric scissors. This is why it's a stupid idea to buy two of the same pairs of scissors and only distinguish between the sewing ones and the regular ones by tape. So that's entirely the consequences of my own actions. Okay, so I think this is going to be one of those trust the process kind of things, because right now it looks like a nightmare crab hat, and I don't think it's going to stop looking like a nightmare crab hat until the whole thing's finished and covered in fabric. I'm not even going to tell you guys to trust the process. I don't entirely trust the process either. I have no idea what I'm doing or if this is going to work, so let's find out. Duct tape patterning, super quick rundown for anyone new here. You cover a thing in cling wrap, then you cover it with tape, usually duct tape. I'm using fragile tape because I bought way too much of it many years ago, and I've been trying to use it all up ever since. Anyway, once you have covered that thing in cling wrap and tape, you can cut it off along certain lines that you're planning on putting your seams, and these individual puzzle pieces are going to form a guide for what kind of shape you need to cut out of the fabric to make a cover for the thing. Often this might be like boot covers or a bodice or some piece of clothing. In my case, of course, it is a giant jester hat. So I've been tracing my taped pieces onto some scrap fabric, and I'm going to cut these all out and essentially sew them exactly back together and see if it kind of works as one giant cover for this hat. Getting each of my foam pieces into these sleeves was a lot harder than it's look. It's like trying to put on a sock, but instead of a foot, you've got a tentacle and you can't feel anything in it. It was a pain in the butt, let's put it that way. Sewing all four of these pieces together was also a pain in the butt, because putting the foam in there before I sewed them together meant that I had a lot of bulk, but we got there in the end. It's still looking pretty nightmarish, but you know what? It's a start. All right, test run time. Don't have a good feeling about this. I think it's gonna be kind of wonky. Oh, okay. Front's not too bad. I think that's about right for where that's sitting. Ideally, that would sit like flat against here, like this. These need to sit way closer in. I've definitely got way too much room at the top here. Okay, it's not a bad start. I'm just gonna muck around with it and see if I can get it to a shape I like. Round two, I shortened the back tails a bit, pinned everything slightly closer together and higher on the head. Okay, mock-up number two, and I think this is starting to look like the shape that I had envisioned. It might mean I don't get as much movement through the back here, but if I have to choose between them being able to flop around a lot and staying in the position that I want them, I'd rather have them stay in position. So now I get to cut into the good stuff, which is both exciting and terrifying because I'm cutting into the really expensive silk that I got from overseas, so I literally cannot stuff this up. Laying out this fantastic dupion with utmost reverence, it is time to cut out those pattern pieces. Sewing these pieces together was a bit of a time just because these curves are quite complex to manage, and while I know this is going to get drowned in embellishments later, I want to keep those seams as crisp as possible. So, base hat sewn together. I've already come across several issues. One of them is that the stitching seems to be puckering a lot around the taffeta. It doesn't actually look that bad in camera, but in person I can see it. And it does mean that when you shove the foam in there, it looks really lumpy, which is really annoying. And it also seems to be fraying on some of the edges. I can't find a good example right now, but like any of these seams here, they're pulling apart like almost instantly. And I don't want to do things like French seaming or overlocking because that's just going to create like so much bulk in here. I'm going to hate this bit, but I'm going to unstitch most of these pieces because I think the solution here is using iron-on stabilizer or some kind of interfacing to reinforce everything, which is really gonna suck. I'm a bit sad about that right now, but I think it's better than trying to leave it and having a lumpy hat that I know I'm not gonna be happy with. I have also discovered that I can't unstitch these seams. They are sewn too close together, and the silk, being what it is breaking before the stitches do. So I just need to remember it's going to be worth it because this is going to look very cool when it finishes. If it doesn't, I'm going to cry. On to round 3. I'm applying some iron-on stabilizer to the back of my silk. That is going to help give this a lot of structure. Unfortunately, getting rid of that lumpiness does mean we are also giving up on the idea of the lovely floppy tails, but it's really important to me to have a really crisp shape to start with. I have some thoughts on other ways to add movement into this costume later on, but for now, we're just doing the whole thing again. Now this thing is a pressing ham. It was my Christmas present, so you could even call it a Christmas ham, but essentially it provides a soft curved surface that you can use to iron out these seams. That way I can have lovely flat crisp seams even on these curved surfaces. My technique could probably use some work here, but not bad for my first time using these. Alright, stabilizer was definitely the right move because like this is without any stuffing before I turn it inside out. It's just holding its shape so well and all those edges look really crisp. Okay, that is looking way better. Let's do the other 4 and then see how they come together. So, moment of truth, round 4. Let's see how we're looking. Okay, that is much closer to what I wanted. I like that a lot. This is all just entirely new territory for me, which is why I think it's taken me a while, but the shape is there. I had my heart set on the idea of a widow's peak style forehead where it comes into a point. So with the shape mapped out on some scrap fabric, luckily for me, it just fit on some of the offcuts from the tails, which means there's stabilizer on them already. And I want to bag line these ones, so it's sewing the 2 pieces together and turning the whole thing inside out, which is easier said than done, but it is a tiny bit easier when you have a loop turner, which is this stick thing I'm holding. It essentially hooks the fabric on one end to make it easier to pull out the other side. Looking a little puffy right now, but a good iron will fix that. And if you noticed, I left open the points of the tails. That was mostly to make it easier to shove the foam in, but it did mean that I had to hand stitch all of these back up again. And I still have a little bit of wire poking out at the end here to attach my jingle bells. Now where that wire is in amongst that padding, I'm going to smush that through this top section and just fold it over, and that should pretty much be enough as is to hold that jingle bell in place. Okay, the base hat is ready to rumble. I'm really happy with how everything's sitting. It's very, very loud having these right next to my ears. I'm having deja vu because I had this same issue when I made my Fizzaroli hat. The video for that one's up on my YouTube somewhere. Last time I tried to like stuff the jingle bells to stop them rattling the whole time. I tried that over here. It's not working very well. So I might just see if I can just take the little clappers out because goddamn, like I've had this on for 5 minutes and it's driving me so crazy. I can't deal with that. Anyway, I'm holding it like this because it keeps wanting to slide backwards. So I definitely need to get some sort of more sturdy way of getting it to stay on my head. Let me just play you the video of what it was like to restuff the tails while these were attached. I'm calm, flowing waters, rushing rivers, touch grass, something. I need to get this off my head. All right, team, I've had some off-camera epiphanies. For starters, way less jingling going on. I literally just took them out of these ones, and the back ones I've like stuffed with some tissues just so it's not quite as, what's the word, egregious as it was before. Anyway, the main thing that I'm excited about is I was struggling with the fact that it kept falling back and it wasn't quite sitting right. All I've done is like just done like a little tiny tacking stitch to pull the back forwards so that these are sitting much closer to these ones. And that does a couple of things. The start is it redistributes the weight a little bit, so the weight is not falling off the back of my head, it's closer to the top of my head. The other thing it does is sit these out a little bit, and I like how that looks a lot more. That looks really good. I really think that I might need to just attach all of this onto some sort of rigid cap to just keep everything exactly in place. So I have a literal cap that I've just cut the front, what's it called? The little flap that does this to protect you from the sun. That thing, it's called a brim. I've cut the brim off the cap. So up to round whatever the heck it is now, my plan is to literally hand stitch and machine stitch the cap to the hat so that I have some sturdy base for this to sit on. So it's been around 2 days of me fiddling with this damn hat. The main thing that I'm getting stuck on is trying to get it to sit on my head comfortably and securely, which seems like it should be a relatively straightforward thing to do. I am struggling so much with this. It's just, the problem is that this damn thing, it just keeps wanting to fall off my head, like it's pulling everything up. And so I keep trying to counteract that by putting in various different things to create like a band around here to hold it to my head tighter, but then it becomes so tight that it's not comfortable. So then I'll like try something different, but each time I feel like I'm going around in circles, and like I've just sort of at the point where I'm over-engineering things. Like you can see I've got a stiffened bit of felt in here and some warbler to try and like hold the tension, hold it taut. And I've got this stuff which I've been like putting in the back, and then I've created like a gap here to try and ease the tension on the back of my head. Oh my god, I expected the Jester hat to be a relatively simple, straightforward and fun thing to make. And I swear to god, I don't know if it's just me, but every time I start a project, it doesn't matter how easy I think it's going to be, I find a way to make it really difficult. So, game plan from here. I'm gonna take a break, drink some tea, touch some grass, then I'm gonna change direction a little bit. I need to create a really good, sturdy, comfortable base to start with. And for that, I want to try using some Fosshape and warbler to create essentially a helmet kind of thing that is going to be comfy and stay on my head and is going to fit really well from the start. From there, my plan is to try and reuse the same horns because I like the shape of them overall, and see if I can glue/sew them onto my base without having that weird tension thing where it's like all trying to pull up. And we'll see how that goes, because I really don't want to make all of the horn like sewing parts again because I'm happy with the shape they are currently. I just need them to stay on my head. All right, good pep talk. See you in a little bit, hopefully once I've done some shopping and improved my mood. Okay, and we're back in business. I have touched grass, I've drunk tea, I have done some shopping, and I'm feeling much better. So, it turns out Fosshape is really expensive. I got like half a meter of this stuff and it cost me 35 bucks. That's more expensive than my silk. I probably didn't need a full half a meter, but I figure I'll probably use it at some point in a future project. They also had this, which is literally a bundle of Fosshape offcuts, so I've got something to practice on. Because even though I've heard great stuff about Fosshape, I've never tried it myself, and so I do want to have like a bit of a practice to kind of get a feel for it before I cut into the good stuff. They also had this $10 packet of warbler offcuts of various sorts, including that little woven thermoplastic, which is the one that you can sew through, so I may end up using that one for reinforcements on my hat. For now, it's time for a practice round with the Fosshape, and we'll see how this goes. From what I've read, this works similar to warbler in the fact that you can start to mold it as it heats, but it also kind of shrinks as you heat it, and you kind of have to work with it really fast to get it in the shape that you want. So I'm just gonna see what happens. Oh, there you go. So just a tiny little bit of heat and it's already curving upwards, and that heat's almost already gone. So it seems to have like shrunk and also gotten a little bit stiff on the side with the heating, but it's still a little bit softer on the back side here. Okay, so this stuff might be expensive, but I can see the appeal because it is instantly hardened into that shape that I've squished it into. There's still like a little bit of give and flexibility there, but it pulls itself back into the shape, and it's like stiff, but I can still get a needle through there, which means that I can still sew onto it. Before I do it for real, I do want to have another quick practice round and just see exactly how far you can push this stuff. So I'm gonna see if I can mold it around this weird brass vase shape. Look at how well that has picked up the curves of this thing. No wonder people love this stuff. This is great. This is so much fun. So rather than just barreling on ahead, I want to get this right and fitted from the start. So I'm gonna make a duct tape pattern of my head. I actually have a lot of experience wrapping up my own head in cling wrap from dyeing my hair as a teenager. Fragile tape round 3. My trial and error approach to cosplay usually works to my advantage, but for this project, it just meant a lot of extra steps that didn't really need to happen. And it turns out this was one of those, as I discovered once I put it on my mannequin head that this was the size of my head all along. Well, sometimes trial and error is just going to involve a lot of error. Anyway, my plan from here was to sort of stretch and pin that Fosshape over the mannequin head. There's enough give to this stuff that I barely had to create any folds. Now applying the heat gun should shrink it a little bit so it creates like a slightly tighter fit on my head. More importantly, stiffen that Fosshape into place so it works like a helmet. And look at that result. This stuff is so much fun. And I was still able to make use out of the duct tape pattern by marking out where I want the hairline to be. Where it splits at the back here, I've put a tiny little bit of elastic, but in general, this fits my head so freaking well. This is so lovely to wear. It's so comfy. There's just like the tiniest little bit of tension, and this area at the front here has been really well heated up so that it sits snugly without pulling tight against anything. And it's good stuff. Visual demonstration of this video so far. I thought this project was going to be an A to B, nice and straightforward, simple project. What this has been so far is actually like this weird sort of loop where we've tried all these different ways and we've only just ended up here. But at the very least, we've learned a lot along the way, right? Now I'm going to use this woven thermoplastic cobra cast as basically an extra bit of reinforcement at the front here. So I'm kind of creating like a half helm where it's going to go across the front and top of my head. I've sewn this into place just to make sure nothing's going to start to pull on this like it was before. Thoughts and prayers here, folks, as I'm gingerly sewing the base hat to the jester hat and hope that this base will finally hold everything in place. Okay, you guys, this is it. This has worked exactly the way that I wanted, and I can't believe after struggling, trying all these different things, this was what it took, because one of the things I was having was I wanted this to sit like flat against my skull here, so you got this really nice, like defined dip, and that's working really well. Everything's sitting really well. It's sitting in the right place above my ears. These are sitting nicely, and the best thing is all of this is sitting really well without like giving me any really sore spots or like I'm gonna have a tension headache. And like everything's sitting pretty well. Granted, there might be a bit of weight at the back once I restuff these back pieces, but for now, oh my goodness, I have a sense of relief. I have a second wind, I guess. There's always a second wind in most of my projects, like that moment of triumph after the fall. I have covered up all of my shame, which is those incredibly messy stitches here, and covered up this back portion here where I had like all of the Fosshape sticking out. Now, my initial plan for the embellishments of this piece was to do everything the correct way, actually using like best practice techniques like hand stitching, embroidery, lovely beadwork, not doing the old cosplayer trick of relying on hot glue and hopes and dreams. That was the plan before the base took a gajillion years to get sitting right, and now I have no patience and no f***s left to give. Therefore, we are going full feral crafting mode here. There's gonna be hot glue, fabric glue, super glue, and maybe if we're lucky, some tacking stitches on things that really do need it to get stuck down. Let's get stuck in and just have some fun with it. First embellishment, and I knew from the start that I wanted to use this applique right in the middle of the hat. So it's all fabric glue and then just pinning and clipping this down. I'm gonna leave this to dry overnight because I really just don't feel like having to sew this down, and I want to make sure that glue is 100% set. Doing my version of the morning shed, and the results are pretty good. So for embellishments, I really just want to go as gaudy and all out as I feel like. The only real limit is just making sure that I don't cover too much of this teal that doesn't show through, because it is just It's very beautiful. I've established that by now. So my gut instinct says I want to use the Jingly Bell trim on this. And I know that I spent all that time taking out the jingle bells out of these giant ones, but these ones are a much softer sound, so I'll see if I can cope. And while I'm not going full patchwork, I wouldn't mind adding in some extra textures as well. I do have this stuff here, which is the sash from a silk like dressing gown. So I think I'm gonna like kind of wrap a couple of those around and create some stripes going down. I'm just gonna kind of follow my gut instinct with this one and see what turns out. I do notice that a lot of the time, if you can get like a really strong foundation or base, you can get away with like a little bit more spontaneity when it comes to like the other steps, just because you have that solid base to start with, which is why I was so picky about getting all the shapes and the fit right for the base, because now my hope is that I can just start decorating with more reckless abandon and it's still gonna look great. I do love that I'm using terms like reckless abandon and feral crafting while I'm very carefully and gingerly draping bits of ribbon over a hat. I'm not too worried about these being like perfectly evenly spaced down the hat just because it's quite uneven anyway. And if it doesn't quite join up at the back, that's okay too. A lot of this is just gonna get covered up later. And I have been so impatiently waiting to use this trim on something. I am wrapping this thing up like a Christmas present. I used the trim on this back tail as well, but just without that extra teal ribbon. This awkward section where the wire is exposed towards the jingle bell, I'm just gonna hot glue some teal ribbon around the base. Yet again, I am not fussed about this being perfect because I'm about to cover this up even more. I have these weird cone-shaped fittings made out of what I assume is aluminium. I discovered if you cut the bottom off them, you can very easily sort of unravel it into this crown shape, and this just feels like the perfect little shape to go over the end of each tail. That's 2 out of 4 done, and if you're wondering why I've done these 2 and not these 2 yet, it's because I really want to have an asymmetrical design where these 2 have got a slightly different pattern going on. If you look back on the Millinote mood board, you can see that most of the Jester hats that I'm drawing from are asymmetrical anyway with different patterns. They're kind of going for that really patchwork, motley element to it, and I kind of want to do that here. I'm a big fan of the Harlequin patterns, like the diamond shapes that you see on some of these, so I'm wondering if I can incorporate that onto these other 2. And I was thinking of either doing like a bunch of patches cut into diamond shapes using a different fabric, or using a bunch of cord or like beads to create like sort of crisscross shapes along it that sort of suggest that diamond shape. And then I thought maybe I could do both, like have the patches and then have them lined with that crisscross shape, but I'm talking about a diamond pattern on essentially like a really weird long curvy shape. So I think my best bet is going to be doing another duct tape pattern of this horn and drawing those diamond shapes onto it, because otherwise I don't know how it's gonna quite form around like this. So I'm gonna try that. This time round though, I'm opting for masking tape. As much as I love my fragile tape, I kinda need a blank canvas for this one so that I can clearly draw those diamond shapes. That same secondhand silk rope that I used the ribbon for earlier, I'm gonna use the rest of that rope to cut out these diamonds just because I absolutely love this color. These pieces, I ironed some heat and bond to one side. It's basically like a double-sided stabilizer slash adhesive. So with the backing peeled off the other side, I used some glue to secure it on the corners and then ran an iron over the top of it to basically set that glue down and just make sure it's fully fused onto the tail, which was a lot easier said than done for these tricky pieces that curve underneath. The trim, on the other hand, was easy as pie. The diamonds formed the guide for where I wanted to glue down that cord, and much like I did with the applique, I just had to pin it in place while that glue dries. Much like I did for the other side, I did exactly the same pattern on the back tail except without the patches. So base hat is done, and as you can probably hear, I took out the padding, so it's back to being incredibly noisy, but that is future Charlotte's problem. For now, I really want to make some sort of collar, and I was debating between like the more Jester style collars where there's lots of little points, or the what are they called? Elizabethan style ruffs? Historical fashion people, please correct me if I'm wrong about that. Apparently this video is just free reign to actually me in the comments below. Anyway, I kind of want to go for that rough style, but I'm not that fussed about being historical, so I'm going to be using some organza just because, I don't know, I like the texture, I guess. Okay, we are back to my floor because I need to cut out basically a bunch of like long rectangular strips of this stuff, which is gonna form the basis of my collar. Now, if there's one thing that organza is infamous for, it is for being really crappy to sew with, just because it is like so light and it frees easily and it's thin. But I did discover a really cool technique last time I worked with an equally crappy fabric, which was chiffon, which is called band roll. Basically, it's like a really stiff sort of ribbon. I've pulled off a bunch of threads here to leave these little teeth, and essentially you can use this to sort of guide your fabric, sew it on here. You know what? I'm just gonna show you guys. So I'm gonna start off by doing a seam rather than a hem. You've got your two raw edges together, you've got the band roll sitting alongside them, and you're gonna sew so that your needle is hitting just off those teeth, so not within the actual woven part. The band roll also acts to stabilize the fabric, so it's really good for those slinky drapey fabrics. I'm gonna cut off the excess here right alongside those teeth. Now I can open up that fabric and twist the band roll round so that the edge here is fully encased. Once again, that straight stitch is going to go down just beyond where the teeth is, not within that woven section. I believe this is a flat felled seam. Sewing people, feel free to correct me in the comments. With those two lines of straight stitches down, I can pull this band roll straight out of that seam. Just like using a tearaway stabilizer, only easier. And for rolled hems, you use it exactly the same way. If you do want to see a little bit more use of this one, please go check out my fern video. I'll put the link somewhere here. Okay, big long strip of organza with a lovely clean hemmed edge. Now I've done some little test runs up this end of how I want to finish off that edge, because I want to put some sort of gold on there. First one was using this sort of metallic yellowy gold ribbon just straight on the top there. I like it, but it is, I guess, a little bit more close to a yellow than just a straight up gold. Same thing, but like with the ribbon folded over, so it's a bit thinner. I like that more, but I think my favorite was this one here, which is where it's like just exactly the same thing, a ribbon folded over the edge here, but it's a more like true gold as opposed to like a yellow. If you look side by side, you can see what I mean, and I think that true gold is gonna match the hat a bit better too. So I'm essentially folding this over the edge like you would a bias binding. For the base of the collar, I've got some plain teal cotton that I've bag lined here, and I'm gonna sew at a bit of an angle here to create like a V shape on the neck. Just to keep it looking pretty, I've top stitched along that edge and added Velcro on either side to get this on and off easily. Now my ruffled collar section is like several meters long, so I'm just gonna freehand start ruffling this by sort of folding it backwards and forwards and just sewing along that edge. I know this isn't the correct way to do this, but I don't feel like measuring, it's not my jam, so I'm gonna go for it. First round of freehand ruffling, reduce that length by a half. I'm just gonna go for round 2 to get this ruffled up even more. After the second round of ruffling, this was pretty much bang on the length of the base collar. And quite frankly, after all that wrestling with the hat to get it sitting right, it was so nice that this came together so easily. Now that is a very nice looking collar, if I do say so myself. I am debating adding like a whole extra layer of ruffle underneath that comes out a bit wider, but I think I'm going to wait until the rest of the outfit's done first, just so I can see how it sits on the shoulders. Just before we put it all together and call it a day, I did make a couple of gloves slash cuff things for my hands. I want to put some off-white into the costume later on, and I had a pair of white stockings that I sewed into some arm warmers, and I tried to dye my white arm warmers into an off-white by dipping it into some tan dye for like a moment. It didn't work very well at all, but now they just look really filthy. So instead, I'm gonna cheat and use my Zelda arm warmers I made last video, and when I start work on the rest of the costume, I'll just remake the gloves properly. On the bright side, my cuffs turned out absolutely great. I didn't film me making these because it's kind of the same stuff as the collar, but check out these cute little embroidered cuffs. Those were cut from the sleeves from a secondhand top that I got years ago and never really wore. Anywho, with those done, that's all of the elements I really wanted to do for this video, so now it's time to put the whole thing together. So in conclusion, I love it. This is exactly the image that I had in my head for what I wanted to achieve. Quick laundry list of things to improve for the future. For starters, I spent so long making sure that this fit me 100% and then forgot that I intended to wear a wig underneath it. So one of the first things I'm going to do is hack away at this wig, just thin it out until there's not much left to it besides these front curls, because the rest of it isn't even visible. It's just taking up a lot of space under the hat. The makeup, exactly what I had planned. I could have gone heavier, but I didn't want to lean too far into modern clown and keep it feeling like a fantasy jester. Also, as awesome as the long nails look, I hate wearing them so much. It suddenly makes it really hard to do anything with your hands. People who wear long nails regularly, look, I commend you, but this is not for me. So, shorter nails, thin out the wig, remake the gloves, and make a slightly larger rough layer for underneath. Other than that, no notes. This turned out amazing even with all the extra going on. Now I was going to film my outro still wearing the jester hat, but the bells were driving me bonkers. I might regret taking the stuffing out of them, so instead you're getting default Charlotte. Anyway, I think the conclusion here is pretty obvious. I love how it looks and I cannot wait to start on the rest of the costume. Stay tuned for future videos for that because I have big ideas and a big box still full of silk and trim. That said, it might take me a little bit of time to get to the rest of the costume because I have a few bits and pieces coming up before that. And if you're keeping track and are starting to get a little bit concerned by the fact that I have 3 in-progress costumes right now, fair enough. Me too. Ironically, I'm actually really bad at multitasking too, but just with various due dates and waiting on postage, it's just how it's worked out. I promise you I will have all 3 of them complete, and it'll be so worth the wait. Thank you again to Milanote for sponsoring this project, and a huge thank you to my ultimate supporters. These are my top supporters on Patreon: Artemis, Michael, Mix Randvi, Rakishan, Residual Images, Robert Mischief, Tamara, Verilyn, and Yuri. And thank you to these other amazing supporters on screen now. If you'd like to join these cool cats and myself over on Patreon, I post previews, work in progress, and sometimes mini tutorials and videos that you cannot find anywhere else. And joining is the best way to support me so I can keep making elaborate and/or ridiculous costumes like this one. But just by watching the video to the end, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, you are helping and supporting me. So thank you so much for watching all the way through, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!